Good evening, everyone. This is the July 15th, 2021 regular meeting of the Housing Commission. We're going to begin with agenda item 1, call to order. Item 1A is inapplicable as the City Council did not make appointments to the Housing Commission at its last meeting. So we're going to go to item 1B, which is the roll call. And we'll start with Commissioner Hilton.
Here.
Commissioner Flora. Not present. Commissioner Hanson. Not present. Commissioner Kamner. Commissioner Hamilton.
Present.
Vice Chair Buchanan.
Here.
And as well as my dog, Chair Soloff, I am here. That completes item 1B. We're now going to go to 1C, which is election of officers. Election of the office of chairperson and vice chairperson for the term ending July 1, 2022. Excuse me. Pursuant to the bylaws of the Housing Commission, at the first meeting following July 1 is when we should have election of officers. So why don't we start with election for the chair. I'm going to nominate Vice Chair Buchanan. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, let's take a roll call vote. Commissioner Flora, not present. Commissioner Hanson, not present. Commissioner Hilton.
Abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Kamner.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Yes.
Vice Chair Buchanan.
Yes.
And for the last time, Chair Soloff. Yes. Okay. So that completes the election of the chairperson. And as you are now the chairperson of the commission, Chair Buchanan, do you want to take over running the meeting and beginning with the election of the vice chair?
Can I let you finish out this meeting?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, we're now on vice chair. I'd like to nominate Commissioner Hamilton. Are there other nominations? Okay, hearing none, let's take a roll call vote. Commissioner Flora, not present. Commissioner Hamilton, excuse me, Commissioner Hanson, not present. Commissioner Kamner.
Yes.
Commissioner Hilton.
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton. You're muted, Commissioner Hamilton.
Yes.
Chair Buchanan, or excuse me, I'll ask myself, Commissioner Soloff, yes, and Chair Buchanan.
Yes.
Okay, so we have now completed our election of officers. We'll now move to item 2, public input. This is public comment on items not on the agenda, but that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Housing Commission. I know we have at least one person who wants to speak to that. So we're going to begin with Denise Barton. Your time begins now.
Good evening. I'd like to bring to your attention again that the Chelsea 51 units, including 10 affordable housing units, does not have a real on-site resident manager. Another example would be this last Saturday, July 10th, 2021. There was another raw sewage spill in the building, creating a sickening stench on the first floor, the stairwell to the garage, and in the elevator of raw sewage. As a tenant, I would expect it to be taken care of in a timely manner, but there was no action to correct it on Saturday, July 10th, Sunday, July 11th, Monday, July 12th, 2021, So on Tuesday, July 13th, when I saw Rochelle Herr in the leasing office, I asked her, how come the sewage problem wasn't taken care of over the weekend? And her response was, because I don't work on the weekends. And there is another person in the leasing office on weekends. So I followed up with, but aren't you the resident manager? Isn't it your job? She then informed me that someone was coming tomorrow, Wednesday, July 14th, 2021. This is becoming a regular experience at the Chelsea due to the wall painting from the last sewage spill hadn't even been finished before the next one. And since the sewage spills in the garage are repetitive, I have to ask, why is the building management not required to address the sewage spills within the building in a timely manner and fix it so it doesn't happen again? Although it is Greystar Management, the same Greystar Management that manages AO Apartments, formerly the Arboretum, where all 98 affordable housing units have mold and other environmental problems. But yet you, the Housing Authority, and the City Council and the city would rather have the housing numbers instead of having affordable housing that is safe and has a resident manager. How many more examples am I going to have to give showing by Rochelle Hughes' words and actions she is not a resident manager? She's just an employee living on site to give that illusion. And doesn't Greystar have a history of giving their employees residence in their buildings, including affordable housing units, when the units are supposed to be available to the public and affordable housing tenants? Thank you.
Thank you. We have two other people who have called into the presenter queue, so I'm going to unmute both of you to see if either of you wishes to speak on item 2. So just give me a moment to do that. So other callers, either of you want to speak to item 2?
This is Olga Zurawska. Yes, I would like to speak. May I proceed?
Yes, go ahead. But just before you do, other caller, do you want to speak to item 2?
Yes, this is Teresa Marasco. I wish to speak to item 2.
Okay, then we'll begin with you, Ms. Zurkowska, and then we'll go to Ms. Marasco. Ms. Zurkowska, your time starts now.
Thank you. I also would like to speak to 4A later. As for item 2, I have 6 questions or comments I would like to make. Number 1, same question as I asked last month. How much money did the Housing Authority receive over the past couple of decades for tenant participation, and where did the money go? It definitely was not spent on tenant participation, as the Housing Authority did not establish the federally mandated Resident Advisory Board until recently. Again, where did the money go? Number 2. Another question I continue asking, I think this is the 3rd month in a row now, where is the continuum of care representation on the Housing Authority Board? A senior representative of HUD's Office of Community Planning and Development, CPD, has stated in an email, quote, COC regulations do require that there should be a representative of the COC program participants on a policy-making body of the Santa Monica Housing Authority. If the Santa Monica Housing Authority cannot / doesn't have one, this is a requirement that they can request a waiver of. Currently, there is no HUD-approved waiver of this requirement. The Santa Monica Housing Authority has indicated that they will be requiring this waiver as a result of legal requirements for the board composition, end quote. I don't quite understand why the Housing Authority would be requesting such a waiver, especially since the city is so big on quote-unquote diversity now. And I would like to know who has the authority to decide that the Housing Authority will be requesting such a waiver. Is it the interim executive director of the Housing Authority, John Jalili? Is it the Housing Authority Board, which has not met since April 27, where they definitely did not discuss the waiver? Who made this decision to request a waiver and on what authority? Number 3, why is the contact information for the RAB representatives on the Housing Authority Board being hidden from the public? Multiple requests have been made for this information to no avail. Those individuals are public officials now sitting on the Housing Authority Board and cannot be hiding from the public, especially from the people they are supposed to be representing. Number 4, the issue of the Housing Authority not having a system in place to assist voucher holders with disabilities in locating a modified unit that would accommodate the voucher holders' needs. As you might remember, the 2020 assessment of fair housing conducted by Diane Glauber, goal 4 was, quote, increase community integration for persons with disabilities, end quote. And strategy under number 3 for that goal was, quote, provide a point of contact for a dedicated ADA coordinator to track and maintain a list of ADA accessible housing units and coordinate the housing needs for people with disabilities. Additional responsibilities would include assessing risk of violations, coordinating with city departments, and providing education and instruction, end quote. The city does not currently have an ADA coordinator, only a risk management person who on paper has ADA coordinator's duties as well, but does not fulfill them. I have talked to that person and their supervisor, and they were clear that what the assessment of fair housing by Diane Glauber recommends has not been implemented at all. Recently, an email exchange has been forwarded to me where a voucher holder with disabilities inquired with the Housing Authority how they could obtain assistance locating a modified unit. The Housing Authority passed the buck by referring the voucher holder to DCRC, a nonprofit organization that does not possess the information necessary to assist this disabled voucher holder in locating a modified unit, nor is it their job to do it. So much for diversity. I guess the virtue signaling so on vogue these days in Santa Monica does not include persons living with disabilities. Number 5, instead of issuing program-specific vouchers, the Housing Authority issues housing choice voucher certificates to all individuals receiving vouchers in Santa Monica and asks the person receiving the voucher to sign the HCV certificate regardless of whether the person is in fact participating in the HCV program or not. For example, if you are on the COC program, you will receive an HCV voucher certificate too, instead of the COC voucher certificate which you are supposed to receive. The person receiving the voucher certificate is thus deceived as to what program they are in. The HCV voucher certificate is a federal document with a barcode, a unique number, and a space for the Santa Monica Housing Authority signature, as well as the voucher holder's signature. This is how the Santa Monica Housing Authority does business. I'm informed that the Community Planning and Development Office will be issuing a finding regarding this. And number 6, the perennial problem, the Housing Authority ignoring correspondence from the client. I filed a formal complaint with the interim city manager about this. As far as I remember, one of the goals in the administrative plan was to improve the Housing Authority's customer service. I would like to know what steps are taken to accomplish that goal, as I do not see any improvement. And my final comment, I don't quite understand why the leadership was selected tonight for the Housing Commission, where the new appointments to the commission have not been made yet. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Give me 1 second, Ms. Marasco, to reset the timer here, and then your time begins now.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Teresa Marasco, and I would like to bring to your attention the serious issue of the Santa Monica Housing Authority employees' lack of timely responses to emails and inquiries and their poor customer service. Please take note that this problem did not just begin since COVID-19, but it has been a problem since when I first became a Santa Monica Housing Authority client in 2014. I sent an email to James Kemper on July 7, 2021, asking Mr. Kemper about contact information for the newly appointed RAB members. While Mr. Kemper eventually responded to me on this issue, so many of my emails to Mr. Kemper, Anna Topolewski, Andy Agel, and many others at the Santa Monica Housing Authority have gone unanswered and unopened. I specifically requested information from Mr. Kemper on July 7th about contacting the newly appointed RAB members, because even though wasn't selected as in one of those seats, I want to be involved with them, and I think it's important for all Section 8 voucher holders to be able to communicate with the RAB members immediately as they were appointed, and we would like to start discussing with the new RAB appointees the upcoming annual and administrative changes for the annual and administrative plans. However, Mr. Kemper did say that I needed to be patient because the Santa Monica Housing Authority must provide an appropriate solution that connects representatives to the Section 8 community. That doesn't really explain to me exactly what that will be, or why I need to wait to contact them, or any other Section 8 voucher holder needs to wait to contact them. Considering the fact that this RAB should have been in place a long time ago, and that I inquired about this many times over the years that I've been here. Thank goodness for people like Ms. Saraska, who was able to figure it out and really push to make sure that the Santa Monica Housing Authority actually instituted a resident advisory board. So I'm asking tonight, what can the Housing Commission tell me about being able to connect with those RAB members right away? And what is the plan to disseminate information to all Section 8 voucher holders? I also want to mention that it is my understanding as well that the people in the COC program are also supposed to have some type of board, and why they weren't included in the RAB, even though Santa Monica Housing Authority states it's only for Section 8 tenants. I do believe that it's possible for COC voucher holders to be able to also participate as a board member. And that is all for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you go, Ms. Marasco, and if you can't answer this, then I'll think we still have Ms. Zurkowska with us still. When you talk about the people that you want to make contact with, are you referring only to people who have been made part of the Santa Monica Housing Authority itself, or are you talking about a broader group when you say the people in the RAB?
Well, I guess what I'm saying is all of us need to be able to communicate with one another. I found that there is such a horrible closed loop system here in Santa Monica that it's almost impossible for us to be able to ask questions, to have a voice and input. So it would be important for us to be able to contact people both with the Housing Authority Board and the Resident Advisory Board. And yes, it would be great if it could be broader. I mean, me personally, I feel like there should be a website. There should be, an official board set up with bylaws. I think that there should be some way for us to communicate with one another, other Section 8 tenants, other people who are on COC or home programs.
Thank you. I think you've answered my question. And just, Ms. Zarowska, if you're there, just again, I want to just not all thoughts about communications, but just, are you talking about those people who've been actually made part of the Santa Monica Housing Authority governing group itself? Or are you talking more broadly an ability to reach out to anybody who's involved with the Resident Advisory Board? And I just want to be clear so everybody understands, public comment can ask questions. There can't be any discussion by us. These are not topics that were agendized. I just want to make sure I'm understanding public comment. So if you could answer that one question. Oops, sorry, and I think I accidentally didn't unmute you. You want to try again, Ms. Zaraska? I think I accidentally unmuted the wrong person. Okay, well, we'll close item 2. Approval of the minutes. We don't have our draft minutes ready. As everyone sees, we have no staff support, so that has not yet happened, but it will. So we're now on to item 4A, which is Diversity Subcommittee report, discussion of Diversity Subcommittee report and possible action regarding recommendations to the City Council regarding diversity on the Housing Commission and or use of a citizens panel, an additional source of input on housing issues. Just to introduce this item, now Chair Buchanan and I thought, consistent with prior practice where we had a discussion thing, it should come back on the agenda for further discussion if people want to do it in possible action. So it is there. The
presentation on this was made last time, and I guess we have three callers who I think want to speak on this item. I'll see if that's right. So, Ms. Barton, do you wish to speak on this item?
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
I hear somebody. Who's speaking right now?
This is Olga Zuraska.
I apologize. I think I used the wrong number there before for which one you were.
You asked me a question previously about item 2, and you muted me, so I was unable to respond. But okay.
Yes, I unmuted the wrong person. I apologize for that. Can you briefly answer that one question?
Yes. So the people who are representing the RAB on the Housing Authority Board, their information absolutely must be made public. Otherwise, I don't know what the point is of having them there. But there also needs to be a way for the RAB, which is all the voucher holders on HCB, on the HCB program. All of those people need to be able to communicate and have meetings and work together as well. So both. The short answer is both.
Okay, and your understanding at the present time is that none of that is available. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely none of that.
Okay. Thank you. Then I believe, since we have you unmuted, I believe you wanted to speak to item 4A. Is that correct?
Yes.
So why don't you lead us off with your public comment, and your time begins now.
Okay, I'll be very brief. So as I stated in my verbal input at the June 2021 meeting of the Housing Commission, I find it outrageous that the Commission would actually consider the quote-unquote diversity subcommittee report, which suggests circumventing anti-discrimination laws by rigging a lottery for Housing Commission applicants based on race or income level. I support a citywide campaign to encourage applicants for all city boards and commissions. If the city is able to send out the Seascape magazine to every household, then the city is able to also send a postcard to every household in Santa Monica encouraging applications for commissions. For too long now, the power in the city has been concentrated in the hands of the incestuous oligarchy composed of SMER and Santa Monica Forward supporters. The Housing Commission is a good example of this oligarchy's hold on the municipal government. And again, if we're speaking about diversity, this commission needs to also think about people with disabilities, not just people who are of different ethnicities or income levels. Thank you.
All right, just had to unmute myself. I was trying to spare everybody the dog. Thank you. Okay, so I'm unmuting the two other callers. Which of you would like to speak first to item 4A?
You unmuted me.
Okay, so why don't you go ahead, Ms. Barton?
Okay, thank you. Good evening. First, I have to ask why Commissioner Kamner has the ability to submit anything to the Housing Commission agenda, considering it's a well-known fact that she's a paid executive director of Abundant Housing LA and should have registered as a lobbyist, eliminating her from the selection process. Next, I have to next, I could have sworn that we went into and discussed in depth this issue at the last commission meeting in June 2021, and I thought you all agreed that the Housing Commission is not discriminatory. And when did it become your job to tell the City Council what to do on issues other than housing? Maybe you might want to get your own house in order before you start accusing other people of being discriminatory. Because as I keep repeating, at the Santa Monica Housing Authority discriminates against the disabled and lack of supported services, which was in the city's recent affordable housing assessment report. Personally, I think you should get rid of the diversity subcommittee due to it taking up valuable time at your meetings, and it's just now Commissioner Kamner's calling everyone discriminatory and racist, which takes away from your job of improving the conditions of affordable housing units, along with the production of affordable housing. And also, this committee is a political distraction. And it's also a political distraction. Or would this be Commissioner Kamner's attempt to draw attention away from herself? And why would she blindly be trying to make Santa Monica into other locations in the world? Again, since you've allowed Commissioner Kamner to go on in this way, It really makes you all look like you are here for your own self-interest and not for the well-being of the affordable housing tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we have one last caller. I think this is Ms. Morosco. Did you want to speak to 4A?
This is Olga Zurawska, and I have already spoken to this item.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay. Then I guess Ms. Morosco didn't want to. Okay, that completes public comment on that. I just want to say that obviously everybody has a First Amendment right to their opinion and to express it. We appreciate that. I don't subscribe to the views that were just described. I think that it was fully appropriate for the commission to look at how it operates. That is appropriate, and I appreciate, even though I, as people know from last time, did not agree with the recommendations of the subcommittee, I strongly appreciate the work that they did. And last time was just a discussion item. This creates the possibility, if the commission wants to have further discussion and take action on this, or broader ideas of citizen panels giving input on housing issues. I guess I will say for myself, with the 5 of us here, I'm not sure this is the best time for it, but I'm open, obviously, to whatever anybody else wants to do on this item. So, are there any commissioners who'd like to speak to this item? And Commissioner Hilton, is there anything you'd like to say on this? Oh, Chair Buchanan.
So I think in considering the recommendations from the diversity subcommittee, we need to consider them in light of the recommendations, new rules that came from the, what was it called? The committee that reviewed all of the boards and commissions in Santa Monica and made recommendations as far as changes in composition, in tenure, in how meetings are conducted, and also with regard to addressing the issue of diversity. I think that we can't, I think that considering one without considering the other could end up being I don't want to say a waste of time, but if there are things that have already been decided, maybe we should see what those things are and how they relate, and if we can even making some of these suggestions would go any further than just us making the suggestions. I know there are some things that will require a change to the city charter. I know there are some things that require bylaw changes. And unfortunately, I haven't had an opportunity to really sit down and compare the two, especially on this issue. They did have a good section about ways to increase diversity by doing mailers, by making sure things are published in the Seascape. There were a few other things they mentioned.
Just before I see if there's anybody else, Commissioner Hilton, since I can't see whether you're raising your hand, did you want to comment on this item?
Yes. Previously, it was mentioned to have a lottery for commission appointments. And there was a discussion at the last meeting about lived experience for appointees is more valuable than expertise. And I think it might have been mentioned, but I think a combination works best. And over time, those on the commission with expertise learn from those with lived experience and vice versa. Regarding citizens panel, I think it would add a layer of bureaucracy, and I'm not convinced it would make any improvement. It may even interfere or supersede with the role of the public input, and we need staffing and a staff budget, which we don't have. I do have a question for the diversity subcommittee about the citizens panel suggestion. And it's a two-part question. Who would make the appointments to a citizens panel? And it's described as an additional source of input. And what criteria, qualifications would determine who's appointed?
Commissioner Kamner, unfortunately tonight you're the sole representative, so any questions to the subcommittee, you should feel free to just go ahead and answer.
I think I'm confused. I'm not sure. Like, I don't think that the diversity subcommittee was using the term citizen panel for anything. Also, I disagree with that terminology anyway because it's a specific panel. But so I'm actually not sure what we're referring to right now.
Well, it was on the agenda. It was a wording on this agenda for the reference to citizens panel.
Oh, okay. So let me answer that then, because I put that on the agenda. So as you recall last time, I agree with what you said, Commissioner Hilton, that my experience on this commission is that we have both lived experience and have had people with deep lived expertise because of the work they do on the affordable housing issue, which is the real charge of this commission, and that has been productive, and I don't favor eliminating that tool to the city council. But I personally was intrigued last time with the issue of, as an additional data point on one or more housing issues in the city, this concept of a broader citizens panel. And the reason that I'm intrigued on that is that for the first 20 years I lived in Santa Monica, I hadn't a clue about what was going on in this city. And I'm a pretty high politically involved type of person, but the local level was not particularly focused. I don't think I was an aberration. I think that that's the vast majority of people who live in the city. And so I was intrigued that there are places that are trying to see if you could get something that's representative. We constantly have these surveys and other things that are done in the city that are not scientifically valid from a statistical point of view. They're just another form of people opting in. And so I thought it might be interesting. I agree. And so I put that on there as something for discussion. I also agree with you, Commissioner Hilton, that I certainly wouldn't be prepared to make that recommendation tonight. It would take more thought, and also two things. One is, based on everything I hear about where we are in the city these days, as is illustrated by the fact that we don't even have any staff members attending our meetings, that standing up a new program like this right now is probably not something that's likely to happen. But that doesn't mean we ought to not be thinking about it, since it's certainly my fervent hope that the city is on its way to economic recovery, and we'll get back to that. I also tend to think that, much like we started the POD program with a pilot program, and last night 2 nights ago, the city council started the Right to Return program with a pilot program, that probably this would be something else that it might be interesting to do. A pilot, think of an issue that would be a good thing for that, and try it and see what happens, and see whether it adds value, what the cost is, and things like that. So I'm open to that idea and think it's worthy of further exploration, which is why I wanted to put it on there, so that I didn't think we should feel that the only things that we could talk about in this concept
were, the specific first recommendation that the subcommittee came up with, but trying to incorporate some of the thinking that came out during our discussion last week. So it's not, so to answer your question, Commissioner Hilton, it's not thought out far enough on that path to say exactly how it'd be done, although I think it's basically, as I understand what some of these other cities have done in this context, is it's, basically attempting to try and get a statistically valid random sample, recognizing that when you have small numbers, even at 40, the margin of error is very large. But anyway, so those are all the kinds of details that people could think about. But that was sort of the idea it was trying to do, and drawing in people who might not normally express an opinion on these issues to get a broader sense of what the Santa Monica community is thinking on these issues. So I'm sorry that was such a long answer, but I hope that was responsive to your question.
Thank you. No, that
Well,
was.
to further, to elaborate on what Vice Chair Buchanan said perhaps earlier, is in the past, and I don't know if the new commissioners are aware of this, most board commissions took applications, they publicly interviewed candidates, and in some situations they made a recommendation. I looked in my housing commission file, and we used to interview, for example, at our April 2014 meeting, we publicly interviewed, recommended 2 individuals in a letter to council. And I thought this was helpful and assisted the city council. And I think this was an improvement because there was more of a public participation.
Go ahead, Vice Chair Hamilton.
Yeah, I think that as I said in our meeting last month, I think that the most effective way to diversify this committee is through personal relationships within the city that we might have with different people. And if we don't know somebody within our network, we could always rely upon another person's network of relationship. But if we really want to bring diversity, and by that I mean people of color, but also people with lived experience, and also people who understand housing and are practitioners in housing. I mean, it's a whole, it's a gamut of diversity that we're seeking. The hardest way, but the best way is just through our personal networks, and inviting people when there is a vacancy to apply and reaching out to them, because vacancies aren't widely known. And so reaching out to people and encouraging them to apply, helping them, reduce barriers of entry for them, whether they have questions or concerns about time, and, just kind of helping them get through the process, and then being able to introduce them to people who are going to be making the decision, like city council members, and helping them through that process. I think if we're intentional about diversity, I think it really does come down to people in our network. And I think, kind of following on the previous comments, maybe there is a role for commissioners to play, that when we do decide to step down, that we have more of a say in who our successor is. Could be that's one way of looking at it. I understand that there are shortfalls to that approach, because then we end up just nominating people that look and think just like us. That is definitely a hazard if we want to diversify. But I think it's, to me, the best way to do this, because you can't discriminate either positively or negatively based on skin color. And so but there has to be a way, kind of a middle ground between just a randomized lottery where we have absolutely no say in who gets on the commission. There has to be a good middle ground there. And for me, that just means like we know we have a vacancy on this commission potentially at some point in some time. Start working within our network to make sure that that's filled with people that we trust, that we think will be a diverse influence on this committee.
Go ahead, Commissioner Kemner.
Thanks. Thank you, Commissioner Solak, for explaining where the civic panel came from on the agenda. I think that's a really good thought. I don't think that it totally addresses the problem of the lack of diversity on this commission and the fact that we're not legally allowed to seek out or appoint people on the basis of race. The city council is not allowed to do that. So I don't think that there is any other way to diversify this commission. But just putting that aside, that is still a problem that needs to be addressed. I think doing a civic panel separately would be really, really helpful for Santa Monica and this community. Like, I think one thing that the diversity subcommittee found when we talked to the other jurisdictions that had done something like that is like just how much it helped bring people together around city issues and planning for the city, instead of sort of like dividing people in separate interests. So I think it was really constructive. I think it has the benefits that Commissioner Solak mentioned around better statistical representation. It engages people more with the city and what's going on. But I think it's also just I personally perceive a lot of division here about the future of the city, and I think like a civic panel is a really constructive way to get an authentic sample of people from the community to work through a lot of those issues. So I would love to recommend that as a commission. And I think, because the diversity subcommittee talked to Healthy Democracy and like their Eugene, Oregon pilot that they did about housing. And so I think we could do something kind of like that. And I actually think that, my understanding is that for Eugene, that Healthy Democracy paid for the pilot and facilitated it. So I don't think there would necessarily be an issue of resources if we were to do that. One thing the diversity subcommittee could do is go back to Healthy Democracy and kind of find out more details about that and bring like a specific proposal from them about what a civic panel might look like and like what issue we could engage with, and if that's of interest to the commission.
Oh, go ahead, Vice Chair Hamilton.
So just for a clarifying question, Commissioner Kamner, so what you're proposing is a citizens panel that people would be invited to, where they could understand the housing issues and somehow have that be like a feeder into the Housing Commission. Is that how does that diversify the Housing Commission? I just have if you could answer that question, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I'll let Commissioner Kamner, but just to be clear, in my mind, those are two separate things.
Two separate issues. Okay.
Right. I mean, and I guess to be clear from my personal perspective, and since it wasn't clear last time, but I hope I was clear, is that diversity is a good thing, but the importance of this commission and what it's been able to do successfully comes from having people, whether it's because they're the people who've actually lived the problem or people who
have worked on the problem, and that problem that this commission is tasked with is affordable housing. That is what makes it valuable, and to the extent that people who meet those criteria can also bring other diversity that we don't already have. As I mentioned last time, I think we have far more diversity than other commissions in the city, and because diversity involves a lot of different things. But so I don't support trying to disband the housing commission and the function it plays in the city. What I'm interested in is a separate concept, which to me is what in fact what was presented to us was about, because those weren't housing commissions or whatever. They were a group of citizens listening to some things and coming together and forming some opinions on that and providing that information to the decision makers as another data point for them to consider when they're making that decision. So for me, they're two separate things. It came up in our discussion of the diversity committee last time, so that's why it's together on this agenda item, but I don't view them as meant to address the same issues, if that's of any help to you. But
Okay.
Commissioner,
Okay.
so just since I was the one who put it on there, I just wanted to be clear about that.
Okay. All right.
I guess, oh, sorry, you had not finished, Commissioner Kemner, go ahead.
No, that was also my understanding. What you just said is that we're talking about something separate now. The other thing that I was going to mention about that is, Commissioner Hamilton's question was, how would it work with the Housing Commission? So I think, we could do it different ways, but I think what they did in Eugene was that the city convened it separately, and then those were advisory recommendations from that panel that went to the city council. And so I think, for us to recommend something like that, I think that would increase the representation of in terms of like what feedback the city council is getting, although it wouldn't address representation on this commission. But also, I think it's like a good opportunity for us to engage the community in a more constructive way, like guided by expertise about an issue that we find difficult in the city. Like maybe, I don't know, for example, like parking structure 3. Like maybe, I guess parking structure 3 is already approved, but, if that's something that we want, like, we see maybe that there's like some division about it. A good way for the community to work through that would be to do a process like this and then have those recommendations go to the city council.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Vice Chair.
So this panel would be tasked with like a specific issue to discuss, like, for example, parking structure 3. So this would be a panel, they would make a recommendation specific to parking structure 3. Okay. And that recommendation would go to council and would not go to the Housing Commission.
Or it could go to the house. I guess it could. I feel like
Okay.
it could just go straight to the city council. I mean, why not? But it could also be like about a more general issue, like how do we build the affordable housing that we need in the city, something like that.
Okay. That makes sense.
So calling on myself, I guess I would say this to your question, Commissioner Kamner. I think that the concept is worthy enough that, if there's something you can come up with, somebody else wants to pay for a pilot program here or something like that, and what they would think. I think the kinds of questions you're raising, Commissioner Hamilton, are important ones. What exactly would be the process? Who's going to present to this panel? I mean, there are a lot of analogies here made to courts. I can tell you from my 36 years of practicing as a litigator,
It depends what result you get, depends a lot on what you put in front of people. So that whole process would be something that would be relevant to this pilot program and the like. So, but I think it's a concept that's interesting and worth considering. I view it as, like I say, would be an interesting data point. Given that it would take time to stand this up, we'd have to find something that would be, or I shouldn't say we'd have to find. If we were going to recommend this to council, some idea about what maybe might be a good pilot project on it, and then see, and things could be learned from that first one that would go to these other issues that we're talking about. How big should it be? How should it be conducted? Who's going to present to it? Whether it should, whatever it does should be reviewed by, other commissions before it goes and staff before it goes to council, or does it go directly? I mean, all of those kinds of things can be done, but I thought it was an intriguing idea in that regard. So, me personally, I'm just one of the five of us here tonight, and one of whatever the 7 members of the commission will be that at our next meeting. If you can get more information about, that there's somebody out there interested in potentially funding it, and, what their thoughts on that would be good. I mean, to me, this is illustrative of how, in my opinion, in my experience on here, how we've worked best as a commission is not that something comes, you just discuss and vote on something, but we work on it and try and come up with something at the end. If we do come up with something at the end that we can stand behind and say to the city council and to staff, we think this is, a good idea that's worthy of your pursuit. So, just on the other issue, I guess I just wanted to comment on that. I guess I want to make a few comments. First of all, I actually did not like the old system where people recommended who their successors or who should join them. I have to say, as somebody who, like some others here, did not get appointed the first time, although I then attended every housing commission meeting for the next 10 months before the next opening and whatever. There was politics involved in it back in those days. I was told by a member of the city council then that staff had lobbied on who should be put on the commission. There were strange things done with people's applications and who the clerk and who the commission notified about the fact that there were going to be interviews and the like. Hopefully those are all past things that have been corrected, but the system like that has that danger. And ultimately, I also think that, elections matter, and the city council is the only democratically invested body in the city, and that, they should be making the appointments based on information and that. So I completely agree with Commissioner Hamilton that any qualified people who we think would add value to the commission, regardless of any other things, ought to be there, but that presumably if the pool is broadened, that should, involve perhaps more diversity than when it is just very, very few people even know that it exists out there. And then hopefully the city council, in terms of doing it, will add the one form of diversity that we don't really have on this commission. So I guess Chair Buchanan and then Commissioner Camner.
So perhaps I was extremely naive back then when I joined the Housing Authority. I did not realize there were any politics involved in the interview process and then the recommendations being made. I saw it, I was interviewed. Interestingly enough, I also received a phone call from somebody asking me to apply. I still don't know who that was. apply specifically for the Section 8 opening. I guess it disappoints me to hear that there were all sorts of politics, involved in the selection of commissioners whose goal it is to, or commissioners on a commission who's with the goal of benefiting basically the entire city through their recommendations. I still like, my problem with not doing the interviews is I don't see how the city council, I would like to know if the city council actually looks at the applications. I just don't know how from a piece of paper they can get a feel or a sense of someone. And perhaps that's where colleagues, talking to them or whatever comes into play. But I think without them interviewing, I don't know how they can get a sense of someone just from an application, it's not a piece of paper, it's an online application. And so since we stopped doing that, that's been my concern. I don't know if they are doing interviews now. It's my understanding they're not, but that's my concern. And I don't think we were the only commission that did it that way. I was told that was the way that many other commissions handled it, and that some continued to handle it that way. In terms of the citizen committee, I have mixed feelings because I have been involved in many committees and work groups that the city has put together, and for some, I'm still wondering whether anything that we recommended went anywhere, or was it just an exercise in us getting together and talking, and the recommendations that we had really never left the room. I also think that if you're going to have a citizens committee, I don't know, the issue of housing is so broad. The issue of diversity is so broad. I think I'm just having a hard time envisioning how we could do that in a way that would provide what it is that we're hoping it would provide. Because, again, we have the issue of getting the word out there that committee is there, and that we need people, on the committee, and how is it going to be decided who's on the committee, or will it just be for anyone? I think it's something to explore, but I'm not quite ready to recommend it to council until at least I have a better idea of what would be involved, because I don't want it to be an idea that's recommended and then someone runs with it and it ends up not being what we're thinking it should, what we're thinking it should be.
So I will just make one observation, which is that, there are 5 of us here tonight. I think it's pretty clear we're not going to be making a recommendation tonight. Just listening to comments, because I don't see any way of counting to 4
on that. So, but at least for me, if people don't object, I think, Commissioner Kamner's idea of getting additional information about the citizens panel would be, helpful. And my only point about that being that to the extent there are other things that people feel is important to say tonight, we should say it tonight. But and if people don't, don't think that they would even consider that, they might want to let Commissioner Kamner know that before she goes and gathers some additional information. But otherwise, I think we've sort of aired, everybody sort of stated their general positions between these two meetings, and I don't see we're going to
One more
decide
thing.
tonight. So yeah, go ahead, Chair Buchanan.
I do not think that if there's a citizen committee that's dealing with housing, affordable housing, that recommendations should go to the city council without first coming through us. I think that's in part why we're here. I mean, I know that's why we're here. And I think, not that we wouldn't pass things on, but I don't see it as a checks and balance, but I think that when it comes to housing, we should know what's going before the city council, what's going to be suggested to the city council. In the event that perhaps we really don't agree with something, or have a way of tempering it somehow, or anyway, that's my thought.
Commissioner Kamner.
I thought Commissioner Buchanan brought up a good point, which is that sometimes recommendations just kind of, don't end up going anywhere or being incorporated into anything. And I sort of think that's a challenge with any commission. I mean, I often feel concerned about that with the Housing Commission. I sort of think we have like the same problem with that. But I think where this is useful, like where it's uniquely useful, is that, we all often have this discussion like, oh, what does the community want? What does the community feel about this thing? What is the community concerned about? But it's like, we don't really know, except besides like what we experience in the community. And, when the city council has the same discussion, it's the same thing. They might hear from like a certain group of people that tend to be the same people giving community input, like self-selecting people. Also research from Catherine Einstein at BU shows that the people most likely to self-select for that kind of input overwhelmingly tends to be like whiter, wealthier, privileged people. So, that's not, so, just to Commissioner Solof's point earlier, like the city council and we on the commission, we're not really getting a statistically accurate view of what the community thinks or wants. But, on the other hand, we could just poll the community. But is that even that valuable? Because like if you just poll people, oh, what do you think about parking structure 3 today, without giving them like the larger context of housing affordability in the city and housing needs and parking needs, then can they really like provide informed input on that? So I think this is the best way to fill that piece of what is the community really thinking on an issue, which I know definitely does go into the city council's decisions. And it's just about doing that better in a more representative and more constructive way. But then I wanted to also address like Commissioner Solof's question about like how the presentations would go. So what they did in Eugene was that they had a steering committee that chose some of the presenters, I think like 4, but then all of the rest of them were chosen by the panel itself. And they had a professional facilitator. So that's what they did in Eugene. It wouldn't have to be the same necessarily, but that's just to sort of put that on your radar. But do you want me to ask Healthy Democracy to come present, or do you want me to just get a report and bring it out? Because I'm sure they would come and present if we wanted.
So when you say present, do you mean like come and sort of give us more detail about what they did and whatever, and then people could think about whether they wanted to ask them to do a proposal for us or something like that? Is that what you're thinking? We should poll everybody here, but I think that would be interesting.
I think it would be.
Looked like, I'm sorry, I thought I saw Commissioner Hilton popping up, and he hadn't spoken for a while, so I just want to make sure he's had an opportunity.
Well, there's been a lot of references to identity characteristics for appointments. And my experience is that what's most important is not that a blue person represents the blue community or they're best at representation, or that somebody that's red can represent a red community, but I think advocacy skills. And sometimes that takes experience. Some people are good at it, and some people are not as good. But I think that anyone that's good at advocacy and has compassion can represent any specific community. The reason I didn't apply for the Resident Advisory Board is because the letter we received for the Housing Choice clients said that if there's 2 or more applicants, that a lottery would determine the 2 appointees. And I didn't apply because the emphasis on a lottery is a random selection, and it doesn't take into account merit qualification, which I think is the most important part of any applicant process. I think a random selection doesn't mean somebody's going to represent our Section 8 clients. I think it takes some experience, it takes some leadership skills, and so I didn't apply. Finally, as far as a citizens panel, I do think it adds a staffing and budget requirement, and I don't think it necessarily would improve housing discussions or commission appointments. So I won't be voting for a citizens panel. But those are a few comments.
So, Vice Chair Hamilton, but I guess for all of us, I would urge that we think about what, with only 5 of us here tonight, we need to add to what's already happened. I'm not particularly, because I'm just playing this role because I had the moderator link and the agenda up. So next meeting, I won't be doing any of this, but just in terms of that. But go ahead, Vice Chair Hilton, and Vice Chair Hamilton. There was a time when it was Vice Chair Hilton. There was a time when it was Chair Hilton. And then I just wanted to make that, maybe if I just make one comment. I know we don't have a broad group watching this tonight, and we don't know if anybody will, but people should know that there is, in fact, potential appointments to the City Council pending right now, and if people are interested, they should apply. And at least my own personal view is that people should reach out to the council members who make that decision and make themselves known. And, the council people will have to make their decisions about whether they're going to talk to people or not. But go ahead, Vice Chair Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Soloff. I won't say a lot because I think a lot has been said, but I think if we do want to ever want to use a citizen panel, it could be something. There's so many logistical questions about who's going to staff it, who's going to cover the costs, who's going to, make sure that it's moderated, etc. And maybe there's a group that Commissioner Kamner knows of that would be willing to do such a thing. But one idea is that if perchance there comes an issue before the Housing Commission that we want to get community input on, and broaden the voices that make a decision, that help us make a decision. We could, I think probably the most practical way of doing this is the Housing Commission itself could request that a panel be formed that offers recommendations to the Housing Commission to help us understand the issue better and to make a more informed recommendation to City Council. That seems, I'm trying to meld together a couple of these different ideas that I'm hearing from different commissioners, and maybe that's one way that we do this, where I do think it probably makes sense to have the Housing Commission maintain the issue of housing before the City Council to not confuse people. But I also like the idea of a citizens panel with a limited scope that could broaden the number of voices that are taken into consideration. So maybe we go about it that way. But I think there has to be some kind of third party that's willing to do the work that the City Council or the city staff probably doesn't have the capacity to do right now.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with Vice Chair Hamilton having had the last word on that item? Okay, so that completes item 4A. We're now on to item 4B, which is the work plan. Discussion of annual work plan and potential priorities and possible action setting, long range agenda and work plan. And I guess at the time that I worked with Chair Buchanan on putting this together, while we have this in every one of our meetings to allow us always to be talking about what we want to do next in compliance with the Brown Act, both from the perspective of what we need to do, in my mind, to be productive, and also in looking at what the latest directions from the City Council is about how commissions are supposed to operate. I think we do need to develop a year-long plan of what we're going to do. I think that in COVID, with so much disruption and meeting very sporadically and not even knowing when that was going to happen, and the agendas being limited and all of that, and then with the housing element out there, which was certainly something that we knew we wanted to make comment on, we didn't really need to do that. But I do think it would help us to actually have what is it we really want to accomplish as a commission over the next year. And so while this is always on the agenda, the thought was that we would have probably a deeper discussion about that tonight, recognizing that again, we're limited by the fact that there are 5 of us here, and we don't have the City Council appointments yet and the like. But I do think that discussion is at least kicking that discussion off, because we're obviously not going to form a work plan without the rest of the commission. I think it would be a good discussion to have. So that's why it's on the agenda. So Chair Buchanan.
It was my understanding from the list of requirements that came from the City Council that started with the committee that they had reviewing all the commissions and how they operated, that we have to have it. Each commission has to have an annual plan from here on out. I mean, that's something that we're going to have to do regularly. And I don't know how specific they want it. I mean, that it just sort of said we have to have one. Which is why I think one thing we need to do is go over that document and have a discussion and make sure that we understand it, because I think we're supposed to we have to accept it by the end of the year and it didn't sound like we could accept it or not. It sounds like we have to get to the point where we accept it, and then we have to say we accept it by the end of this year. It's sort of, you have to decide whether you accept it, but you don't really have a choice. You have to accept it. Was how I understood it.
Well, so on this topic, I think listening to what you're saying, which I agree with, one thing on our annual work plan has to be bringing our processes in compliance with the recent directive of the council by the end of the year. So that's one item that necessarily has to be, and I agree with you. It would behoove us to have a discussion. I think it was originally just sent to Chair Buchanan and myself when we were both the chair and the vice chair of the commission. We asked that the staff send it to all members of the commission, so I think everybody's had it. And I think that's one thing that we have to agendize. I agree with you that the directive from council right now is to follow exactly what's there. I think it will be within our rights and I believe appropriate in the work plan for us to review that. And to the extent there's something in there that we think is problematic, we can certainly convey that to the city council, and they can do as they will, as they always do with all of our recommendations, either think we're right or not. But that's certainly one thing that must be on the work plan. Just to give an illustration also of what I'm thinking, is one thing that I think should be on our work plan over the next year is developing recommendations for the expansion of the pod program into its next phase, beyond the $1 million that's being spent now only on seniors. So I think that's something that I'd like to see added to the work plan this year. So but I know there are other commissioners who want to speak on this topic. So
may I just say something?
Sure, absolutely. You're the chair.
And the new guidelines that are not really guidelines, but they're, what all the commissions are supposed to do. I'm very bothered by it seems that there's an aim to make things very homogeneous. And I don't know how beneficial that will be in the long run. So anyway, I think that if there are things in there that we as a commission don't think should apply to us or that we disagree with, it would be important for us to let the city council know. And I agree about the pod program.
Commissioner Hilton, since I can't see whether you're raising your hand, did you want to comment on this item?
No, except that I never received the staff report. It sounds like it came from the city clerk's office, perhaps.
So it's not a staff report for this meeting. What it is from the clerk's office. It has the resolutions or whatever exact form. I don't recall off the top of my head, whatever exactly it is that the city council passed and the attachments to it, which provide the directions of what all commissions, including ours, are supposed to do. And that originally came by email, and then we asked that be sent to the rest of the commissioners. So it may be that they didn't get it to you, so we should definitely follow up with staff to make sure you get that. But it's not something that's agendized for discussion tonight. So Vice Chair Hamilton.
Thank you. Just a couple quick logistical questions because I'm sensitive to the fact that we should probably have a full commission to discuss our work plan. But just to follow on that, are we going to have a meeting in August, or are we going to take the summer off?
My recollection is we've never taken
Okay.
any time
All
off.
right. Okay.
We've never taken that summer off.
Got it. Okay. Because I was thinking, we'll definitely, even if we do meet in August, I expect that we'll have a new member of the commission by that point in time, more than likely. And so I think we should. I mean, my recommendation is that we set our priorities when we have a full complement of the commission. The other question I have is, do we have any indication that city staff will attend any housing commission meetings going forward? Because they do agendize items for us, and that is obviously a big part of our purview and workload. So do we know if we're going to have any staff at all?
So let me respond to a few, each of the three things you've raised there. So number one, I completely agree with you, and at least from my perspective, the idea was not that we were going to set our agenda tonight, but the extent people already know something they want on it, throwing it out now so others can think about it for a month till we actually do it. It's just consistent, in my view, with always good practice, which is not trying to do everything in the immediate meeting. Number two, you and and Chair Buchanan will be the people talking with staff about that issue going forward. My personal guess, based on my experience, is that at a minimum, it is reasonable for us to expect that once a quarter, staff attend the Housing Commission meeting, just as staff is once a quarter supporting other commissions. When the City Council specifically allowed us to meet monthly, that was on the understanding that we would have to do what we're doing here, which is running the meetings ourselves. And I think that's so. I think that would be my own personal view of what, at a minimum, we should be entitled to, and that might affect agendizing so that certain things where we need the staff's input to move forward would be those meetings. And then you had another question that I actually had an answer to. I'm trying to remember what it was. Whether we can have staff.
I think that was.
That may be it. So, and I do.
That was it.
And that also goes to to Chair Buchanan's point, because one of the things, as we'll see in the guidelines, is that there are limits put on all commissions now about, which I think always existed, but what I think we told all of the folks who are new to this commission, that it's not like we can just, ask staff to do all of this work, but we are entitled to get access to information that is peculiarly within the purview of the staff. And I don't think that would necessarily have to be at a meeting. So, for example, if we were to have a discussion about pod expansion at some time when we didn't have staff in advance of that, asking for, updated numbers on where we stand, or information about what capacity, if any, there is in the existing staffing to, conduct such an expansion, or would it require another person? And then if so, what would that cost look like? Those kinds of things, I think, would be legitimate requests, even if we didn't necessarily have the staff at the meeting itself. I remember what the last thing I wanted to say is, you're absolutely right. And when we did set the work plans
pre-COVID, one of the things when we originally did this was to ask sort of like over the next year, what are the things that, you know, the Housing Commission must do? I mean, that's when we were called back during the pandemic. There are certain HUD documents and others that we are required to have input on, and there's certain times of year when that happened. And in terms of setting a long-range agenda, whether staff's at our next meeting or in the context of getting the information of them so we can do our job, it would be helpful to get that list so we know what we could effectively, you know, put in a meeting without it going till midnight.
Okay.
Chair Buchanan.
And I think we need to find out what we have to do if there are any changes in light of there are now 2 people officially on the Housing Authority Board, 2 people who are Section 8 participants. Because it was my understanding that the 2 positions on the Housing Commission were basically filling that requirement, that HUD was accepting that as fulfilling the requirement for having housing choice voucher participants on the Housing Authority Board. That's how it was explained to me by Jim.
I think that was the original position the city took, and without trying to get into whatever, I know there are members of the community who have views about that. I may have personal views about that one way or the other, but the bottom line is that, as I understood what they told us last year, that whatever that past practice was, that going forward, it was going to be met that way. But it's also my understanding that the requirements that we have for members of this commission, unless and until the city council changes them, remain as they were, that we have to have at least, it doesn't have to be only, but we have to have at least 2 program participants, and that at least one of them has to be a formerly homeless person, and at least one of them has to be a person facing some sort of mental or physical challenge type issue. So I believe that's still part of the requirements for this commission, independent of whether for other reasons they've done that.
I'm not talking about the commission makeup. I'm talking about the things that the Housing Commission has been required to do.
Oh.
Typically because there were 2 housing choice voucher participants on the commission. Now that you have the 2 randomly selected people, and you have a list, so if they can't serve, they'll just go down the list and choose the next person. Is that going to have an impact on, I think we need to find out how that's all going to work, and will there still be the same requirements for us? I think there should be. I don't think what we're required to do should change, but that hasn't really been spelled out or even touched on. So.
I understand your point, and you're correct that independent of the issue of the advisory board and all that, my recollection, and I'm not offering a legal opinion here, but that there were certain state law things that if the city council was the housing authority as opposed to an independent one, then you had to have a housing commission and certain things happen. But I agree with you that we should, in making that request so that we can do a work plan to staff of what are the things that are going to be coming in front of us, we ought to know what they think they're required to bring to us. And then we could discuss, to the extent it's not what we've looked at before, whether we think nevertheless, we would recommend to council that we continue to weigh in on those other things. I'm not seeing a hand at the moment. While I was reminded here, we have heard at a number of meetings, and I heard from
Zerkowska earlier today, some specific questions about the operation of various aspects of the program. I know in the past, when there have been questions like that, since we're not in a position to answer them, but staff did speak to them. And I guess for me, it would be worthwhile if we could to have a point where somebody from staff would come in and explain the answers to that in an agendized thing so that the public knows what the answers are to those questions. I think I recall we had some discussion, for example, about the RAB and whether people needed to be on the housing authority itself and whatever. And I think regardless of whatever the right answers are, I think it's always a good thing for the public to hear whatever the answers are. And so I think that would also be something that would be worth our doing.
I know HUD does not, the COC, the Continuum of Care, is not a Section 8 program. It's a voucher program, but it's a very specific type of voucher program.
Right, but we haven't agendized talking about what the answers are, so I don't think we should try and do that. All I'm saying is that in the work plan, I think having a meeting where these questions that have been raised, somebody comes and explains what the city's position is on the answers to that would be something that's worth building into our schedule. Like I said, my view tonight is we're just throwing out ideas. People can think about them. As Vice Chair Hamilton said, we're not going to really do a work plan without our full commission, which we understand based on what Commissioner Flora has said, will include at a minimum at least one new person. So, I'm all with that. I was just throwing out ideas that are in my mind of things that we want to do so others can think about it. And if there are others who have that tonight,
answering a
they
question.
can go ahead and do it. And if not, we can finish. Go ahead,
Answering
Chair
a question
Buchanan.
that I knew the answer to. That's all. I wasn't trying to discuss it. I would just
No,
answer.
I know. I'm just trying to be careful of, we don't have on the Brown Act issues, that's all. So
Forget it.
in my last time of having responsibility for policing that, I thought I would throw that out there, but I understand exactly what you're trying to do.
No,
So is there
I
anything else on this topic that anybody wants to discuss tonight? Okay, hearing nothing. We'll now move to item 5, which is Chair Commissioner's Report. Information on housing issues, recent or future City Council actions, other city commissions, and issues affecting housing in the city of Santa Monica. Are there any commissioners who would like to speak to this agenda item? Commissioner Hilton?
Yes, my report this month is about our U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Continuum of Care housing funding, and separately our local Santa Monica expenditure for homeless street outreach, and they're both different. On June 22nd, our City Council accepted a HUD Housing Authority ongoing grant, and the amount was $4.5 million in Continuum of Care funding. That funding, $4.5 million, provides Santa Monica with 239 voucher residential unit subsidies. A variety of local homeless programs utilize the housing subsidies. The city has 5 permanent supportive housing, step up on second developments, which provide 136 apartments, permanent housing, and we have 6 homeless housing case management shelter programs, and they provide 372 transitional beds. The city in June, and I mentioned this last month, was awarded an additional 104 HUD emergency housing vouchers, and these clients will need case management housing assistance. Separate to the HUD Continuum of Care housing subsidies, our City Council, June 22nd, allocated a modified addition of $1.2 million to the people concerned and $800,000 in modified funding to LA County for Santa Monica homeless street outreach. In summary, the locally funded street outreach is for interviewing, assessing persons experiencing homelessness, and the federal funding and local permanent and shelter housing, together with the requisite supportive services, helps to keep individuals off the street and safely housed. And that's my Section 8 report. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hilton. Rare for me to speak to this item, but I think there were some actually important things since our last meeting that are worth mentioning. Number one, in the budget process, the City Council did refrain from diverting the GS and GSH funds to general budget needs, and so those funds are now flowing back into the Housing Trust Fund. In addition, the City Council directed staff, and it is in their long-range budget planning that I believe it's beginning in fiscal year 2023 over a 2-year period. They're going to repay to the Housing Trust Fund the money that was diverted last year during the pandemic to meet the emergency in the fund. So the Housing Trust Fund will be made whole, and all of the money that the taxpayers the voters voted should go into the Housing Trust Fund will ultimately go back there. Secondly, the demolition permit for parking structure number 3. Sorry, not the demolition permit. The direction of City Council for the staff to enter into a contract with the folks who will conduct the demolition of parking structure 3 and the turning it into a site that then could be turned over to an affordable housing developer was approved by council on its meeting on Tuesday. In addition, during that, they advised that while the bill hasn't passed yet, but at least in the bill, the earmark that Congressman Ted Lieu put in for this project for $2 million of federal funds is in the bill. That earmark was accepted, and we were also informed that Senator Padilla is in a different set of funding committed to putting in an earmark to help us turn that site into affordable housing. So that project seems to be moving ahead, and certainly historically this commission was concerned that this be a place that would show a substantial commitment to moving towards creating homes for homeless Santa Monicans, among other affordable housing things. And so that's moving forward, and staff advised that they're looking to actually bring to council, and I'm hopeful will also bring to this commission before it goes to council, their recommendations of what bidder to accept in project. So that I thought was significant. Another issue that this commission discussed in January, which was the colloquially referred to right to return. The City Council approved a pilot program for that on Tuesday evening as well, putting the preference after people who were in the city and were displaced, but before the live work people, but a pilot program for up to 100 such families. And then the staff indicated that based on learning from that, they would come back to council within a year to talk about how the program might look permanently. And again, I'm hopeful that that will come to us to weigh in on before it goes to council. So, and lastly, I just wanted to say that the council also directed staff to develop an outreach program to make sure that both our
tenants and our landlords in the city of Santa Monica understand that there is this now over $5 billion fund to pay back rent and even some future rent for people who have lost their incomes due to COVID. And so that direction went forward, and I can say, having had some communications with city staff about that, that is moving forward. So look for that, and be sure if there's any, low-income renters that people know who might need this program, to make them aware of it and to be looking for information from the city to help facilitate that happening. So that's my report. Are there any other Chair Commissioner reports? Okay, great. With that, we're on item 6, adjourning the Housing Commission. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.